The clock had long since struck midnight, and a suffocating heavy silence blanketed the city as they finally arrived back. After dropping her off, Kha Luong faced the grim prospect of returning home to confront his mother, his expression as morose and dejected as a man attending his own funeral. The man's mouth, which usually rattled on huyen, without a moment's pause or rest, had finally fallen silent, clamped, shut by the weight of his own anxiety. Today he had encountered the spirit of his own grandfather. In a few moments he would have to face his Rakshasa mother, a woman 10,000 times more ferocious and terrifying than even his grandfather could ever be. Suddenly Tan Kam felt a pang of genuine pity for him. Once she stepped inside the safety of her own house, she immediately fed Hak Bao until he was full. To ward off the creeping shadows of fear that threatened to swallow her, she switched on every single light in the house, bathing the rooms in a bright, artificial glow. She intended to record every harrowing detail of what had transpired on her computer. A chaotic sequence of unanswered questions swirled violently in her mind. First, she could not fathom why that female ghost was relentlessly stalking them. Was it because they had worn clothes crafted from that cursed red cloth? How could a mere piece of red fabric act as a beacon, leading a vengeful spirit directly to them? What was the true, dark origin of that red cloth? Why had old man Ho's mother, a woman who spent her life tailoring, been scared into a state of total disappearance by that ghost? Was that female spirit truly so horrific? As of now, the whereabouts of Thi remained a complete mystery. The souls of Lam Ki and An Ki had already fallen into the clutches of that spectral woman. Even more Bai's, early Kha Luong's grandfather had suddenly manifested, and to make matters stranger, he had addressed her as his junior sister. The number of inexplicable, eerie events in a human life was simply too vast. Tan Kam furrowed her brow in deep concentration and distress. Time bled away rapidly before she knew it. It was already 12:15 in the morning. She felt no urge to sleep at all, her fingers busy typing and recording notes on the computer. Suddenly a memory struck her. When old man Ho's mother had been scared into a disappearance by the ghost, she had blurted out the words "kabang." She wondered if kabang was merely a nonsensical sound uttered in a moment of pure terror, or if it held a deeper, more sinister meaning. She immediately navigated to Google to search for any information related to this term, kabang. Finally, she stumbled upon a lead on a web site from Hong Kong. There it explained that kabang was an ancient Cursian omnipotent curse, the most terrifying curse known to exist. An unsettling feeling settled deep within her chest. She told herself she should stay away from this website, but her curiosity was far more powerful than her fear, drawing her in with an irresistible dark magnetism. She decided to take the risk. As soon as she opened the page, the computer screen flickered several times before turning off completely. Never before had she heard of a virus capable of shutting down a machine in such a manner. Then the computer began to reboot itself, but suddenly every light in the house died, as if an invisible hand had flicked the master switch. Tan Kam was seized by panic. She pulled out her phone to check the time. It was 12:29. Many websites dedicated to the paranormal stated that 1:30 in the morning was the hour when ghosts most desired to manifest. They also claimed that at that exact moment, if one were to look into a mirror, they would see the inverted reflection of any spirit lingering beside them. She quickly grabbed a hand mirror, placed it face down on the table, and thought to herself that even if there truly were a ghost, it could no longer frighten her. The computer finished its reboot and was just about to load the home page at that precise moment. The clock on her phone ticked over to 1:30 a.m. The computer screen suddenly became blurred and ethereal. Tan-Cam assumed it was just a virus, and she stared intensely at the keyboard, searching for a way to fix it. She looked toward the computer screen and saw her own reflection staring back. The screen had transformed into a polished mirror. She was paralyzed with shock, not knowing what to do. Darkness surrounded her with only the faint, ghostly glow of the computer monitor illuminating her face. She tried desperately to shut the machine down, even pulling the power cord, but it had no effect. The screen remained a smooth, mirrored surface, reflecting her face, which was twisted in absolute raw terror. Suddenly, she discovered that there was someone else sitting in her lap. A small dark shadow was perched upon her thighs, its head slumped forward onto the computer desk. Anyone who loves children enjoys holding them, and Tan-Cam was that kind of person, but this time she was scared to death. She looked down at her lap in a rush of panic, but she saw nothing there. She looked back at the computer screen, and there the reflection clearly showed two people. The child seemed to realize she was looking for it, and it suddenly burst into a loud, piercing wail. It was the exact same crying sound she had heard inside the car on the day they went to dig up Kha Luong's grandfather's grave. Goosebumps erupted all over Tan-Cam's skin. She searched for Hak Bao with her eyes, but couldn't find him. Turning her head, she saw Hak Bao sitting on the windows, his fur standing straight up as if he were preparing for a life or death struggle, with something lurking just outside the window. Hak Bao could no longer protect her. She felt like she was suffocating. The child's crying grew louder and closer. She was frozen with fear, her body stiff. She wanted to stand up, but her legs were like jelly reef, using to lift her weight. Slowly, the child began to raise its head. She saw the child's face. It looked to be about 3 or 4 years old. The most horrific part was the blood. Thick, dark blood streaming down from its 2 empty eye sockets. It had no eyes. Someone had gouged its eyes out. Fresh blood was dripping down its face, spilling on her hands. Then the child began to move. It twisted its neck in a full 360-degree circle, though its body remained perfectly still. The small ghost looked at her and spoke. "Big sister, he, my eyes hurt so much. Can you let me borrow your eyes?" It leaned forward, its face still directly facing her. She didn't dare look at it through the computer screen any longer, because it was getting too close to her own eyes. Its tongue flicked out as if it wanted to lick her eyeballs. "Big sister, I need eyes." The distance between her and the entity was so small that she could feel the cold dampness of its tongue brushing back and forth just inches from her eyes. She was in a state of total, absolute despair. Her eyelids throbbed with a sharp pain. Perhaps the small ghost had already begun its gruesome work. In that very moment, the crushing pressure suddenly vanished. The lights that had been out for so long suddenly flooded her face with brightness. Her entire body surged with a fierce renewed energy. She saw someone hovering in the air within the computer screen. Upon seeing that person, a flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. It was Kha Luong's grandfather. His hands were clasped together, and a powerful talisman was pinned to his chest. His movements as he brandished his hands were incredibly skilled and masterful. It was he who had driven away the small ghost It was he who had saved her from certain death. He floated closer and spoke to her with a warm, familiar tone. "Junior sister, it is truly good to see you again, Grand. Father, I am not your junior sister." The feeling of having to call a man as young and handsome as Kha Luong Grand Father was not pleasant at all. She noticed that the young grandfather's eyes were filled with a certain romantic charm, truly like grandfather, like grandson. She felt a sense of indignation in her heart. "Junior sister, are you still angry with your senior brother? When you left before, Master and I were heartbroken. Neither Master nor I blame you. Why did you leave?" Tan Cam wondered to herself, could it be that even ghosts can lose their minds? "Junior sister, listen closely, for the veil between the worlds is thin, and my time is fleeting. Every day I am permitted to manifest in the mortal realm, but a single time, and each appearance can endure for a mere 3 minutes before the shadows pull me back. I arrived at the very precipice of your doom, just in time to shield you from peril. Now you must speak quick. Tell your senior brother everything from the very beginning to this harrowing moment." The sands of time slipped through his ghostly fingers all too fast. Before his spectral form dissolved in't the ether, he leaned in and whispered his final commands to her junior sister. "You must go to the grandest library in this city. Once there, seek out the forbidden tome titled The Complete Encyclopedia of Curses. Look deep within its withered pages for the entry regarding Kabang. There, and only there, will the answers you seek be hidden. You must find it, but heed my warning, tread with ultim, and caution, for the air around you is thick with lurking terrors and hidden dangers. And remember, you must not go alone. You must take Kha Luong with you." With those final words, the old man's spirit gradually drifted apart, his essence evaporating in't the cold, empty air. Tan Cam pouted in a fit of frustration and anxiety, 1 appearance a day, and for only 3 measly minutes. It felt like a cruel joke, hardly enough time to breathe, let alone solve a mystery of the macabre. That night's sleep was a distant stranger. She tossed and turned in her bed, her mind a chaotic whirlwind of shadows and whispers, until sheer exhaustion finally dragged her in't a fitful, shallow slumber. All the while Hak Bao, the black cat, stood guard like a silent obsidian sentinel over her restless soul. As the first gray light of dawn bled through the curtains, she scrambled to find Kha Luong. When she finally managed to get him on the phone, his voice sounded ragged and drained, as if he had been dragged through. Grovelled Tan Cam, "Just stay at home and wait for me. I'll be there in a moment." A long while passed before the shrill, jarring ring of the doorbell finally pierced the silence. She flew to open it, finding Kha Luong standing on the threshold with his clothes torn and disheveled. He was gasping for air, panting heavily as if he had just escaped the snapping, foam-flecked jaws of a rabid beast. "What on earth happened to you?" She gasped, pulling him inside. "My mother," he wheezed, clutching his chest. "She released a swarm of cats right in front of the door to trap me. I almost went in't. Anaphylactic shock, just trying to break through. She is a formidable woman, truly terrifying, but she underestimated me. She can use whatever cruel tricks she likes, but she can't keep me caged. Will always find a way to escape to your side." Looking at Kha Luong's face, which was drenched in sweat and etched with exhaustion, Tan Cam felt a wave of emotion so strong she found herself momentarily speechless. She quickly recounted the terrifying events of the previous night to him, and without wasting another second, the two of them set out for the city library. As is often the case with such institutions of forgotten knowledge, The library was situated in a desolate, windswept wasteland, far from the bustle of the living. As they walked toward the looming structure, she noticed the side of his face was a violent, angry red, still bearing the distinct bruised imprint of a hand. "Did your mother strike you?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "And are those your grand father's earrings you're wearing?" "She hits me like it's her daily bread," he replied with a grimace that might have been a smile. "Whenever she's stressed about something she is me as a punching bag until I'm half dead. I've grown used to the rhythm of her rage. But tell Meadow, you think these earrings look good on me." A sudden nervous laugh escaped Tan Cam's lips, her mind drifting back to the eccentric, jovial old man who insisted on calling her junior sister. "Did your grandfather have a junior sister by any chance?" she inquired. "How could you possibly know that?" Kha Luong's eyes lit up with a spark of ancestral pride. "My grandfather was a sorcerer of immense power, a legendary master in his day. Back then, his sect was a force to be feared and respected." Kha Luong began to boast with his usual flair, and she feigned a look of mock disgust to tease him. The icy wall of hostility and mutual hatred that had stood between them when they first met had long since crumbled, replaced by a playful, albeit sharp-tongued camaraderie. However, even now, they couldn't help but trade barbs and bicker every few steps. The playfulness died the moment they stood before the library. The building loomed like a gargantuan tomb, radiating a sense of abandonment and decay. Tan Cam shivered, her skin crawling with an instinctive dread. "Why is it so unnaturally cold here?" she whispered. Without a word, Kha Luong picked up Hak Bao and tucked the cat in it, Tan Cam's trembling arms offering the only comfort he could. They pressed close together, their shoulders touching for warmth and courage, as they ascended toward the second floor. This was the archive reserved for rare documents and forbidden research. While humanity usually craves things that are rare and precious, the opposite seemed true. For these books, the reading room was so frigid and desolate, it inspired a primal bone-deep fear. The vast cavernous hall was silent save for the rhythmic, unsettling sibilance of two librarians. They were whispering to one another in low, hushed tones, while their hands moved mechanically knitting woolen sweaters with long, clicking needles. It seemed that as long as they presented their identification, they would be allowed to enter the shadows of the archives. The two of them separated to scour the endless rows of shelves. Tan Cam felt a heavy sense of wrongness settle over her. The atmosphere was thick with an unseen pressure. Strangely, despite the distance, the hushed murmurs of the two librarians began to drift toward her, their words clear and sharp, as if they were whispering directly into her ear. The room was a labyrinth of paper books on geography, ancient scriptures, literary critiques, modern novels. They searched row after row, but the complete encyclopedia of curses remained elusive, hidden away in the dark. Just as she was about to turn back and ask the staff for assistance, she heard it, a shrill, high-pitched female voice echoing from the far end of the stacks. The sound was growing louder and closer with every passing second. Could the librarians be coming this way? She thought she could take the opportunity to ask them, but then she felt Hak Bao stiffen in her arms. The cat's fur stood on end like needles, its back arched, and a low guttural growl vibrate in its throat, to sound of pure, unadulterated predator warning. Seeing the sudden, violent change in Hak Bao, Tan Cam knew disaster was imminent. She quickly ducked behind a towering bookshelf, peering through the gaps to find the source of the sound. Her blood ran cold. She saw a handable, trembling and sick lick, clutching a small fruit knife. The tip of the blade was dripping with fresh, glistening blood that pattered rhythmically on the floor. "This is bad," she hissed to herself, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She pulled Hak Bao tight against her chest and began to back away with agonizing slowness. The high-pitched voice suddenly cut out, leaving a silence more terrifying than the noise. Picking through the shelves, she saw the hand waving the knife back and forth in the air, aimless and erratic, as if the person holding it were blind or had lost all sense of direction. Tan-Kam slipped off her shoes standing bare, foot on the freezing stone-cold floor, and began a silent, ghostly retreat. She tried to reason with her fear. Surely this wasn't a ghost. If it were a spectral entity, it wouldn't be fumbling in the dark. It would have slaughtered her already. Was it possible? Were they possessed? Had the malevolent spirits taken hold of the living? She was paralyzed by indecision, not knowing how to signal Kha Luong or how to scream for him to flee this nightmare. She continued to move backward, her eyes fixed on the path of that gore-stained blade, her mind consumed by a single desperate thought. She had to find Kha Luong and get him out of this tomb of books. Finally, her eyes landed on him. He was sitting on a bench, a few rows ahead, completely engrossed in the pages of a book. She didn't dare call out for fear of alerting the killer. She ran toward him as silently as a shadow, but as she drew closer, the air left her lungs. Kha Luong wasn't sitting alone. A woman sat right beside him, her head bowed. Tan-Kam assumed she was one of the librarians, but the woman's hair was a matte, wild mess of tangles, and her entire body was drenched in dark, wet blood. The blood on the knife, it must have come from her mangled body. The woman was holding something in her hands. It was a pair of eyes. The dark, glassy pupils of those disembodied eyes seemed to stare directly at Tan-Kam with an uncanny, knowing gaze. But what truly sent a jolt of pure terror through Tan-Kam were the woman's fingernails, Lam-Ki. This blood-soaked creature was Lam-Ki. Was she planning to murder Kha Luong right then and there? Tan-Kam realized with a surge of horror that Kha Luong was completely oblivious to the monster at his side, lost in the world of his book. She opened her mouth to scream a warning, but then that piercing, high-pitched female voice rang out again from the shadows behind her. The woman with the knife was closing in fast. If she shouted now to warn Kha Luong, she would only draw Lam-Ki's murderous attention and seal both their fates. Thinking fast, she set Hak Bao down on the floor and used all her strength to shove the cat toward Kha Luong. At the very least, Hak Bai's supernatural instincts might be enough to protect him. Then she turned and bolted toward the back of the bookshelves, intentionally making noise to lure the owner of the high-pitched voice away from the boy she cared for. The weight of the situation crushed her spirit. Her only protection, her only talisman, Hak Bao, was gone. This time she was certain she was walking toward her own execution. She thought of her senior brother, praying for a miracle, but despair washed over her, had already made his appearance for the day. There would be no more help from the spirit world. What would happen to Kha Luong if she perished here? Would he be next? A wave of bitter, suffocating regret flooded her soul. She should never have listened to the old man's ghost. She shouldn't have dragged Kha Luong into this cursed place. Perhaps the ghost hadn't foreseen this, that the vengeful female spirit could manipulate and possess the living like mindless puppets. Suddenly a new sound froze the marrow in her bones, the the thin, high-pitched voice of a child, echoing from the far end of the darkened room. Was it the same child from the night before, the one who had demanded her eyes with such chilling innocence? There was no more time left to think, no more time to run. That shrill, high-pitched voice was coming for her step by agonizing step, drawing closer through the darkness of the library. Kha Luong, Kha Luong. Wake up, please wake up, this library, it's haunted, you have to get out of here, right now, there was no time left to hide. The librarian was closing in, the sound of heavy rhythmic footsteps echoing through the narrow corridors, drawing closer with every passing second. As she scrambled forward, the path ahead vanished, the hallway ended in a cold, dead wall. Standing directly before her was a towering row of dark wooden cabinets. With nowhere else to run, she was forced to seek refuge inside one of them. She desperately shoved against a heavy cabinet door, finding the interior unexpectedly spacious and deep. She lunged inside, disappearing in the suffocating darkness from within the shadows. She heard the footsteps outside begin to slow down. It was hunting her. She could hear the entity dragging its feet across the floor, a slow, deliberate scrape that signaled its terrifying approach. Tan-Kam could no longer process a single coherent thought, her mind consumed by a primal fear. Her only desperate hope was that Kha Luong had managed to escape this night. As for herself, she knew her chances were fading. She curled her body into a tight ball, squeezing into the furthest corner of the cabinet and holding her breath until her lungs burned, praying that the thing outside would not hear the frantic pounding of her heart against her ribs. Then the sound of a child's voice began to drift through the air, growing louder and more distinct. It was coming for her, nearing the very cabinet where she lay trembling. Tan-Kam squeezed, her eyes shut, her vision swimming in blackness. A piercing, high-pitched female voice suddenly ceased its chatter, stopping directly in front of her hiding spot. She heard a sickening sound. A creature's hand was already fumbling with the latch, its fingers grazing the cold metal of the handle. At that exact moment of absolute dread, a hand, ethereally cold and devoid of any warmth, emerged from the darkness behind her within the cabinet. Those frigid fingers clamped firmly around her wrist, pulling her backward into the void. To her shock, the cabinet was not a dead end. It was a hollow passage, a secret gateway that connected to an entirely different, hidden room. She tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat as a palm was pressed hard against her mouth, silencing her completely. By the time the cabinet door finally creaked open to reveal the hunter's gaze, Tan-Kam was gone, dragged away by that mysterious secret arm into the depths of the other room.